The apartment felt different the moment I walked in. Not empty exactly. His furniture was still there. His books still lined the shelves we'd assembled together on that rainy Sunday last fall. But something essential had shifted. Like the air itself had changed composition. I found the note on the kitchen counter, propped against the ceramic mug I'd bought him for his birthday. The one with the ridiculous cartoon penguin that always made him smile. Mika, I can't do this anymore. I'm staying at my brother's place until I figure out what's next. We'll talk when you're ready to really listen. D. I stared at those words until they blurred, my hands shaking as I held the paper. This wasn't supposed to happen. We were supposed to be different. We were supposed to make it work. But I knew, deep in the pit of my stomach, that I had pushed him to this moment. I had chosen my stubborn independence over our future, and now I was facing the consequences of that choice alone in our suddenly hollow apartment. Let me back up. My name is Mika, and I've always prided myself on being fiercely independent. At 31, I'd built a successful career as a freelance marketing consultant, owned my own condo, traveled solo to 12 countries, and maintained a carefully curated life that revolved entirely around my own schedule and preferences. I didn't need anyone to complete me. I was already whole. Thank you very much. When I met Damon at my friend Rachel's wedding reception 2 years ago, I wasn't looking for anything serious. He was the bride's cousin, visiting from Seattle, with kind eyes and an easy laugh that drew me in despite my usual reservations about wedding hookups. We spent the entire evening talking about everything from obscure documentaries to our shared obsession with early morning runs. And when he asked for my number, I surprised myself by giving it to him. You know I live 3,000 miles away, right? He said, his thumb already programming my contact information into his phone. I know, I replied, adjusting the strap of my dress. Makes it simple. But it wasn't simple, not even a little bit. Damon worked as a software developer for an environmental consulting firm, and he had this way of making even the most mundane details of his day sound interesting. Our nightly phone calls became the highlight of my routine. He'd tell me about the new sustainability app his team was developing, and I'd share stories about my latest client disasters. We'd stay up until ridiculous hours debating the merits of different hiking trails or arguing about whether subtitles ruin the movie experience. You're incredibly stubborn, he told me one evening, about 4 months into our long-distance relationship. But I find it oddly attractive. Stubborn is just another word for principled, I shot back, settling deeper into my couch with a glass of wine. Is that what we're calling it? I could hear the smile in his voice, and it made my chest tighten in a way I wasn't entirely comfortable with. I was falling for him, hard, and that scared me more than I wanted to admit. The visit started shortly after that. He'd fly out to Boston every few weeks, or I'd make the trip to Seattle. We'd spend long weekends exploring each other's cities, and I'd watch him charm my friends at dinner parties, or navigate my complicated relationship with my mother during awkward family gatherings. He fit into my life seamlessly, but I remained hyper-aware of maintaining my independence. You don't have to clean up before I get here, he said during one of his visits, watching me frantically organize my already organized kitchen. I've seen you messy before. I'm not cleaning for you, I insisted, scrubbing an imaginary stain from the counter. I'm cleaning for me. It was a lie, of course. I was cleaning because having him in my space felt simultaneously natural and terrifying. He had this way of making himself at home that both warmed my heart and triggered every defense mechanism I'd carefully constructed over the years. The turning point came during his visit in October, when he got food poisoning from a questionable seafood place we'd tried in the North End. I found myself taking care of him in ways that felt both foreign and oddly natural. Bringing him ginger tea, adjusting pillows, staying up half the night to make sure he was okay. He was vulnerable in a way I'd never seen before, and instead of feeling burdened by his need, I felt useful, important. Like I mattered in a way that went beyond our witty conversations and shared interests. You don't have to stay, he mumbled from my couch, his face pale and drawn. I know this isn't exactly how you plan to spend your Saturday. "Shut up," I said, pressing a cool washcloth to his forehead. "Where else would I be?" It was such a simple question, but it revealed something I wasn't ready to acknowledge. Where else would I be? For the first time in my adult life, there was nowhere else I wanted to be. My carefully guarded independence suddenly felt less like freedom and more like an elaborate prison I'd constructed to keep myself safe from exactly this kind of moment. The moment when someone else's well-being became more important than my own comfort. The next morning, watching him sleep peacefully on my couch, I felt a panic I'd never experienced before. Not because I didn't want to take care of him, but because I'd discovered that I did. I wanted to be the person he turned to when he was vulnerable. I wanted to be the first person he called with good news, and the last voice he heard before falling asleep. I wanted to build something real and lasting with him, and that terrified me more than any business presentation or solo travel adventure ever had. I made coffee and sat at my kitchen table, staring at him and trying to reconcile the woman I'd always been with the woman I was becoming. My independence had been my identity for so long that I didn't know who I was without it. But watching the peaceful rise and fall of his chest, I realized that maybe independence wasn't about being alone. Maybe it was about being whole enough to choose partnership freely. The problem was, I wasn't sure I knew how to make that choice without losing myself in the process. When he woke up, he found me still sitting there, nursing my third cup of coffee and looking like I'd seen a ghost. "You okay?" he asked, his voice still rough from sleep. "Yeah," I lied, forcing a smile. "Just tired." But I wasn't okay. I was falling in love with someone who lived 3,000 miles away, someone who made me want things I'd never allowed myself to want. And I had no idea how to handle that without completely restructuring the life I'd worked so hard to build. The real trouble started when Damon began talking about the future. Not in a pushy way, he was too thoughtful for that, but in the casual manner of someone who naturally thought in terms of we rather than I. "There's this great little farmer's market near my place," he mentioned during one of our calls. "I keep thinking how much you'd love it. The woman who sells the goat cheese reminds me of your neighbor, Mrs. Chen." "Sounds nice," I replied. But something in my tone must have shifted because he paused. "You know I'm not trying to pressure you into anything, right? I like imagining you here, with me." I felt that familiar tightness in my chest, the one that appeared whenever conversations veered toward permanence. I know, I like imagining it too. But did I? Or was I just saying what I thought he wanted to hear? The question became unavoidable when Damon's company offered him a promotion that would require relocating to their Boston office. The timing was perfect. Too perfect, really. He could move closer to me, advance his career, and we could finally see where our relationship might go without the constant strain of distance. "It's not about you," he assured me over dinner at my favorite Italian place, the one with the terrible lighting and incredible pasta. "Well, it's not entirely about you. The position is exactly what I've been working toward, and Boston is a great city for environmental consulting. But I'd be lying if I said the location wasn't a factor." I pushed my linguine around my plate, my appetite suddenly gone. "What if things don't work out between us? Then you're stuck here. Then I'm stuck in Boston with a great job and the opportunity to explore a new city," he said, reaching across the table to cover my hand with his. "Mika, I'm not asking you to marry me tomorrow. I'm asking if you think there's enough here worth exploring further." I wanted to say yes. Every rational part of my brain was screaming yes. But the words stuck in my throat, blocked by a wall of fear I couldn't quite name. "I need time to think," I said instead. His face fell slightly, but he nodded. "Of course. Take all the time you need." That was the beginning of the end, though neither of us knew it yet. Damon moved to Boston 2 months later, and initially, everything seemed perfect. He found a lovely apartment in Cambridge, close enough to visit easily, but far enough to maintain the illusion of independence I apparently needed. We fell into a comfortable routine of dinners, weekend trips, and quiet evenings watching movies on his couch. But I felt the walls closing in. Small things started to irritate me, the way he'd leave his coffee mug in my sink, how he'd suggest plans for weekends I'd already mentally reserved for myself, the casual way he'd talk about our future, as if it were already decided. I was thinking we could check out that new exhibition at the Museum of Fine Arts this Saturday, he said one evening, scrolling through his phone while I attempted to grade papers from a workshop I'd been teaching. I can't Saturday, I replied, without looking up. I have plans. Oh? What kind of plans? I didn't actually have plans. I'd been planning to clean my apartment, maybe go for a long run, catch up on some reading. Solo activities that recharged my batteries and reminded me who I was outside of this relationship. Just personal stuff. He set down his phone and turned to face me fully. Mika, is everything okay? You seem distant lately. I'm fine, I said, but even I could hear the defensive edge in my voice. I just need some space to breathe. The hurt that flashed across his face was unmistakable. Space to breathe? We see each other maybe twice a week. That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean? I couldn't answer because I didn't really know. I just knew that I felt suffocated by his presence, by his expectations, by the way he seemed to assume I'd automatically reshape my life to accommodate our relationship. The fights became more frequent after that. Not screaming matches, we were both too mature for that, but tense conversations that circled around the same fundamental issue without ever addressing it directly. He wanted more commitment, more integration of our lives, more evidence that I was as invested in our future as he was. I wanted to maintain my independence, to keep my life exactly as it had been before he'd entered it. I'm not asking you to give up your friends or your career or your hobbies, he said during one particularly frustrating discussion. I'm asking you to make room for me in your life. Real room, not just the spaces you decide are convenient. I have made room, I protested. We spend tons of time together. Do we? Or do we spend time together when it fits your schedule, in ways that don't disrupt your routine? I opened my mouth to argue, then closed it. He wasn't wrong, but I couldn't admit that, without admitting that I'd been approaching our relationship like a part-time hobby, rather than a genuine partnership. The final straw came on a Sunday morning in early March. I'd planned to spend the day working on a presentation for a potential client, but Damon had shown up with coffee and bagels, suggesting we drive out to Concord to see the historic sites. I can't today, I said, not even inviting him inside. I have work to do. You always have work to do, he replied, his patience finally fraying. When was the last time you spontaneously changed your plans for anything? For me, my work is important. Just because I'm freelance doesn't mean I can drop everything whenever you feel like taking a scenic drive. This isn't about work, Mika. This is about the fact that you've never, not once, prioritized our relationship over your own convenience. The accusation stung because it was true. I'd built my entire adult life around my own needs and desires, and I'd been unwilling to compromise even the smallest elements of that structure for him. Maybe you should date someone who doesn't have a career, I snapped back. Someone who can be available whenever you need entertainment. That's not fair, and you know it. Neither is expecting me to drop everything because you decide you want to play tourist. He stared at me for a long moment, his expression shifting from frustration to something that looked like resignation. You're right, it's not fair. I'm sorry for expecting you to act like someone who actually wants to be in a relationship. He turned and walked away, leaving me standing in my doorway with my mouth open, clutching the coffee he'd brought me. I didn't hear from him for 4 days. When he finally called, his voice was careful, measured. I think we need to talk. Okay, I said, though my heart was already racing. Can you come over tonight? There's something I need to say. I knew what was coming. I'd known since the moment he'd walked away from my apartment that I'd pushed him too far. But I wasn't prepared for the finality in his voice when he opened the door. I can't do this anymore, Mika. We sat on his couch, the same one where we'd spent so many comfortable evenings, and he explained with heartbreaking clarity why he was ending our relationship. I love you, he said, and those words hit me like a physical blow. I love your intelligence, your ambition, your fierce independence, but I can't be with someone who treats love like an inconvenience. I don't. You do. Every time I try to get closer, you pull away. Every time I suggest we take a step forward, you find a reason why it's not practical. I've spent months trying to prove that I'm worth disrupting your perfectly organized life for, and I'm exhausted. I wanted to argue, to defend myself, to explain that he was wrong, but the words wouldn't come because deep down, I knew he was right. I had treated our relationship like something I could manage and control, something that would exist entirely on my terms. I thought love meant never having to compromise who you are, I said finally. No, he replied gently. Love means choosing to compromise because the person is worth it, and I've never felt like you thought I was worth it. That night, I went home and cried harder than I had since my father's funeral. I cried for Damon, for the future we'd never have, for the realization that I'd sabotaged the best relationship I'd ever had, because I was too scared to let anyone past my carefully constructed walls. I threw myself into work with renewed intensity, accepting every project that came my way and filling my schedule so completely that I barely had time to think about what I'd lost. My friends tried to comfort me, but I brushed off their attempts at sympathy with claims that I was better off alone anyway. You're being ridiculous, my sister Karen told me during one of our weekly phone calls. You found someone who loved you exactly as you are, and you threw it away because you were afraid of having to share your precious independence. It's not that simple, I protested, isn't it? You've spent your whole life building walls to keep people out, and then you act surprised when someone who actually cares about you gets tired of being kept at arm's length. The months that followed were a blur of client meetings, solo dinners, and increasingly hollow victories. I landed a major contract with a tech startup, traveled to conferences in 3 different cities, and received recognition for my work from a professional organization I'd been trying to impress for years. All the things that had once felt like meaningful accomplishments now felt empty, like I was going through the motions of a life I no longer fully inhabited. I heard through Rachel that Damon had started dating someone new, a teacher named Amanda who shared his love of hiking and apparently had no qualms about rearranging her schedule to accommodate weekend adventures. The news hit me like a punch to the gut, but I forced myself to smile and nod as if it didn't matter. He seems really happy, Rachel said carefully, watching my reaction. She's nice, very flexible. The word stung because I knew what she really meant. Amanda was everything I hadn't been, willing to compromise, eager to build a life with someone else, unafraid of losing herself in partnership. It wasn't until I found myself spending my birthday alone, eating takeout Chinese food while watching a romantic comedy that made me cry, that I finally acknowledged what I'd lost. I'd thought independence meant never needing anyone, never having to adjust my life to accommodate another person's needs or desires. But watching the couple on screen navigate their relationship with humor and grace, I realized that true independence wasn't about isolation. It was about being secure enough in yourself to choose vulnerability. I'd been so afraid of losing my identity that I'd refused to let it evolve. I'd protected my independence at the cost of my capacity for genuine intimacy. The realization sent me into a period of serious self-reflection. I started questioning all the choices I'd made, all the walls I'd built, all the reasons I'd convinced myself that needing someone was a weakness rather than a strength. I thought about my parents' marriage, how they'd maintained their individual identities while building something beautiful together. I thought about my grandparents, who'd been partners in the truest sense of the word until my grandfather's death last year. I'd watched these examples of healthy partnership my entire life, but I'd been too scared to trust that I could have the same thing. 6 months after Damon's note, I ran into him at a farmer's market downtown. He was with Amanda, and seeing them together, the easy way they moved around each other, the natural rhythm of their conversation, I felt a stab of recognition. This was what I'd been afraid of. This was what I'd convinced myself I didn't want. "Mika," he said when he noticed me studying the selection of apples at a nearby stand. "Hi." "Hi," I replied, acutely aware of Amanda's curious gaze. "How are you?" "Good, really good." He gestured to the woman beside him. "This is Amanda. Amanda, this is Mika." She was prettier than I'd expected, with kind eyes and a genuine smile. "It's nice to meet you. Damon's told me a lot about you." I wondered what he'd said, but didn't ask. Instead, I made polite conversation about the weather and the quality of the produce, while internally cataloging all the ways Amanda seemed comfortable in situations where I would have felt constrained. "We should get going," Damon said after a few minutes. "We're meeting friends for lunch." "Of course," I said. "It was nice meeting you, Amanda." As they walked away, I watched Damon's hand find the small of Amanda's back, guiding her through the crowd with the kind of casual intimacy I'd never allowed myself to enjoy. It was a small gesture, but it represented everything I'd been too afraid to embrace. That night, I sat down and wrote Damon a letter, not to win him back. I understood that ship had sailed, but to finally acknowledge what I'd been too stubborn to see when we were together. "I'm sorry," I wrote, not just for how things ended, but for how I approached our entire relationship. You deserved someone who was excited about building a life with you, not someone who treated every step forward like an invasion of her personal space. I thought I was protecting my independence, but I was really just protecting my fear. I never sent the letter. Instead, I kept it in my desk drawer as a reminder of the lesson I'd learned too late. A year later, I met someone new. His name was Christopher, and he was a veterinarian with a quiet sense of humor and an obvious love for his work. When he asked me to dinner, I almost said no out of habit. But then I remembered the letter in my desk drawer, and I said yes instead. Our first date was pleasant but unremarkable. Our second date was better. By the third, I found myself genuinely looking forward to seeing him again. "I should probably warn you," I told him over dinner one evening, about a month into our relationship. "I'm not great at this whole partnership thing. I have a tendency to prioritize my independence over everything else." "Everyone has their challenges," he replied, cutting into his steak. "The question is whether you're willing to work on them." It was such a simple response, but it hit me like a revelation. Damon had been willing to work on our challenges, but I'd been too afraid to admit they existed. With Christopher, I made a conscious effort to be different. When he suggested weekend plans that conflicted with my preferred schedule, I said yes, more often than no. When he left his coffee mug in my sink, I bit back the urge to lecture him about respect for my space. When he started talking about future plans that included both of us, I listened instead of immediately changing the subject. It wasn't easy. Every instinct I'd developed over 31 years of fierce independence screamed at me to maintain my walls, to protect my carefully constructed life from the chaos of genuine partnership. But I learned that love wasn't about maintaining perfect control. It was about choosing to trust someone else with your vulnerability. Christopher and I have been together for 8 months now, and while I can't say I've completely conquered my fear of losing myself in a relationship, I've learned to recognize the difference between healthy independence and self-protective isolation. I still maintain my own interests, my own friendships, my own career goals, but I've also learned to make room for someone else's needs without feeling like I'm betraying myself. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd had this realization 2 years earlier, if I'd been brave enough to let Damon pass my walls, to trust that love could expand my life rather than diminish it. But I try not to dwell on those thoughts too much. Some lessons can only be learned through loss, and some growth only comes from facing the consequences of our choices. I chose my independence over our relationship, and it cost me my soulmate. But it also taught me that true independence isn't about standing alone. It's about being secure enough in yourself to choose interdependence when you find someone worth sharing your life with. Now, when I see couples navigating the delicate balance between individual identity and partnership, I understand what I was too scared to see before. Love isn't about losing yourself. It's about finding the courage to become the person you're meant to be, with someone who supports that journey. I'll always regret losing Damon, but I'm grateful for the lesson he taught me. Sometimes the most selfish thing you can do is refuse to let someone love you completely. And sometimes the most generous thing you can do is learn from that mistake and choose differently the next time love comes around.